Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee with American Scouser. Got the morning coffee here. We got the Kermit going this morning because it's good to be green. Hello, everyone. Not a lot of news this morning, just looking at the headlines, but we'll take a look at some of the big ones. I'm hoping people can kind of chime in and give me their opinions on this whole Keita ordeal. Am I just being paranoid, or is there really truth to the injury, or what the ordeal is? Alan is with us. Good morning. Good morning, Alan. And Chris, as always, good morning, Chris. So let's start with that. Obviously, there's a lot of, I really don't want to get to all those kind of headlines this morning, like the overreaction of, is this Liverpool's demise, or is Manchester United going to win the Champions League and stuff like that? Things that are not possible. So let's start with the whole Keita ordeal. Several teams are obviously lining up because really, at the end of the day, especially if you're a Bundesliga team, you have an opportunity to get a guy that was, the top player in their league before we got him over here, at least one of the top players in their league, and probably at like a really good bargain deal right now. So why wouldn't a lot of Bundesliga clubs be interested? I think Dortmund being interested automatically makes it more interesting because obviously we can then think of, hey, we give you Keita, a little bit of cash, and you give us Bellingham kind of deal. So that's why the Dortmund name over there obviously makes it interesting. I don't think it's shocking that people are after Keita. I mean, you could say, and I would think any Liverpool fan would rightly say, that why would anybody want Naby Keita right now with his reliability? But bear in mind, he didn't have all these issues before when he was in Germany. I mean, it's not like a player that came here with a track record of injuries. So it's more about perhaps his body not being able to keep up with the Premier League, hence the injuries, or maybe Klopp's system and not being able to keep up with that. I mean, because there is counter pressing. I mean, every team presses to a certain extent, but not as much as we were. What he was doing in Leipzig, obviously, nothing compared to what we're doing at Liverpool. Plus the fact that he's not doing it in Bundesliga, he's doing it in the Premier League. Chris says, I've been a huge supporter of Keita because I think he's an ideal midfielder for our system. However, I'm done with all the injuries and contract issues. That's the weird thing. Like, I've probably gone back and forth. I mean, I was probably the biggest critic of him the first season, maybe like season and a half, because I felt like he was trying to do too much. Then I thought he was kind of coming to his own where he was playing within the system, and that's when it's his best. And then obviously the injury part is the frustrating parts with me throughout. And I'm assuming for every Liverpool fan, because every time we feel, okay, here we go. About time, man. Like this is the guy we were waiting for. And then he's out like for like a month and a half. He comes back, the initial, oh, he's just coming back. And then he's like, oh, here we go, man. The guy we've been waiting for. Oh, he's gone again. So it's kind of been frustrating in that sense because we've seen those glimpses of the guy we want. And I think you're right, Chris. He was in several ways the ideal player, right? Because he's that, everybody's constantly, without knowing probably what it means, this creative midfielder thing, like, two guys set the table, the other guy like creates kind of a deal. But I mean, we've had that, and we added some players that can, we don't want just a guy that's maybe like a traditional number 10. We're not going to run as much, press as much, but, get in the ball and he will get it to somebody who's going to score kind of thing. I think that's kind of like a dying breed by itself throughout modern football, and obviously not going to work in our systems. Hence, we threw Coutinho to the left because obviously it didn't work in the middle because of that, because we need more. Our midfield is a lot more complicated than it actually looks in terms of the way we press, what you need in terms of like cutting the passing lanes and all that kind of stuff. So, with Keita, it would be nice to have him regularly play in that midfield because I think he would be the ideal combo of, let's say, a Thiago and a Henderson in some ways, where he has that passing ability and the vision and moving the ball, but still has the work rates and the counter pressing and everything we want for this midfield. He was ideal. And I think in some ways, at least initially, and I can probably speak for myself too, because like I say, I was pretty critical of him when he first came over, is the long wait has made the expectation go up and up and up. Because while we were waiting, we were watching him in the Bundesliga where he was really, really good. And we're like, oh man, when this guy comes in, that you sign somebody in summer, right? Like everybody's on YouTube looking at the videos, like welcome to Liverpool, skills and goals and stuff. So a bunch of highlights. I'm going to make one of mine because I might get a couple of pro offers myself. But, so you look at those videos, it's like a month or so before you know it, they're in the preseason and stuff. When you do a deal like this, where you're waiting months and months and months for a guy, and you get to watch him actually play actual games and not just like YouTube clips and stuff like that, obviously the anticipation goes up, the expectation goes up, and it's kind of hard to match that as a player coming in. And I think his initial troubles were mainly due to that. He was trying to live up to that, force some passes in, trying to thread it in because, I came as the creative midfielder. This is what they want me to do kind of thing. He's like, no, man, just play within the system. And I think when he plays within the system it becomes a creative genie, and I don't mean it in that sense, like Genie Wijnaldum, like, creative, still holding the ball, moving the ball, but still good with the pressing and doing like the work rates and stuff like that. Chris says Mane was his best friends. He corrected it afterwards, so it's not Hood, but yeah, his best friend in the squad. Everything I've heard is that that's a very sensitive person. I don't think he'll make it unless conditions are just right. See, the part with that slightly confuses me is, we knew kind of like they were best buds with Mane. Obviously, a lot more in common. You kind of tend to, apart from Diaz and Elliott, you kind of tend to go towards people that you have more in common with, whether it's culture, religion, maybe perhaps background or how you were raised, a bunch of factors, right? Like the Brazilians hang together, and, that's why Diaz and Elliott make like a weird duo as they hang out. But overall, that's what you tend to do. And could that be a factor? Maybe. And I can kind of see that, if you only had like one or two buds in the team and they're gone. But one, these are pro players. And while they're still human, you would think, he can kind of hang in there. It's not like, he just came to the team. He was really good friends with Mane for 2 weeks. Mane leaves. He's like, I don't know anybody now. He should be able to, still be able to kind of like, he's been in the team so long that I'm sure he's like buds with everybody in some sort of sense. But I think what makes it difficult for him is he's probably frustrated himself. I just did not get, and here's the thing, like we're getting all this from the media, right? He's frustrated. He's unhappy was the key word, right? He's unhappy. Like, we're unhappy too. I'm sure Klopp is unhappy in terms of when it comes to Keita, because nobody got what they were looking for. Is he unhappy because he's not getting opportunities? Well, I don't know about that. I mean, he might be saying, hey, there are times when I'm available and I come off the bench and I don't start. But, we know how Klopp is. If you're not like in practice the whole week, you tend to not play or definitely not start, maybe come in the last 30 minutes or whatever. And, you need to see that continuity in terms of performance. And there have been some games, the Madrid game in the Champions League away comes to mind, where he was kind of yanked because he was horrid. But at the same time, I remember at the time when we were talking on the podcast, almost blaming Klopp a little bit, saying, kind of threw Keita under the bus. And I can't recall why. I don't know if he was coming off an injury, he was not ready yet, or he was his first start in a long time. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I recall the conversation of more than blaming Keita. We said, Klopp kind of threw him under the bus, but Keita should have lived up to it, kind of a conversation. So when he has had those opportunities, he has kind of blown them. But he might be getting frustrated and unhappy because he maybe feels, hey, if I play regularly, I would get into my groove and be able to do a lot more and show you what I can do. I'm that kind of player that needs more consistent play time or whatever. That could have been the conversation. I think when we hear unhappy about playing time, as Liverpool fans, we're like, dude, what the hell? Because you're not available. We're frustrated with your playing time as well. Join the club kind of deal. But it's a weird ordeal with this injury. I really don't even know. There's like words that, first he was like, oh, he might not even be training right away. But then, oh, it could be a long-term injury. But then you see these headlines with all these teams interested. I mean, I can see people like lining up. He's out for 3 months. Sign me up, kind of a deal. Unless they know they can get him for peanuts. They're like, that's fine, man. We'll just put him in the training room for the first 2 or 3 months, and then we've gotten a ridiculous deal for one of the best players in Bundesliga up until like 3-4 years ago. So Alan says, I don't think he speaks English well. He's never given an interview that I recall. He arrived without learning a word. Yes, I remember something that, the club, or at least the fans, were like, dude, you knew you were coming all this time. And we talked about this on the podcast before. It's not like, Keita has to be like, man, I got to sign up for a school, and if I can make the classes. I mean, these guys get private tutors to come to his house and at his convenience and teach him English. And because Chris was mentioning earlier that, the French language, we don't have that many players. Yeah, like I'm trying to think who else from Konate who might speak English. I mean, there might be some players that know a little bit. I don't know if like Thiago knows, for example, just because even though they're not the same, they do tend to have similarities. I'm English is my second language. Obviously, Turkish is the first one. And then I've learned a little bit of German that I've mostly forgotten now. I can only kind of pick words here and there as I listen to a post-match interview with a German coach. Is basically the extent of my German right now. But I've heard like from people who have studied like Italian or French and Spanish and stuff that they're similar, and they're, tend to be, at least, even if you can't speak it, you can kind of get the gist of it. I think of it more like, like Azerbaijan, for example, they speak it older Turkish. So even if you do not know the language, as somebody who is Turkish, you can pick up most of it, even though it's not the same language. So from what I know, or from what I've heard from people, they are similar, but obviously not the same as, knowing the same language. I think we have a lot of people, for example, who speak German, because, Bobby was there and stuff like that, who understand and speak German, like Matip and stuff. But yeah, that's odd. I can't think of somebody off the top of my head that he is like French speaking. There have been also plenty of times where Nabi unlocked the stubborn defense and won a match with an assist or a goal, but we could use his weekly pay to get way more reliability. And that's the problem. I mean, we talk about this. Gally always talks about this on the pod, and he is definitely right in the extent that we kind of tend to hang on to players. Klopp's loyalty sometimes kind of bites us in the ass. The problem with that is I don't think you can have it both ways with Klopp. You can't have like that team building and the team spirits, all about the squad thing going, if you're constantly like dumping people, because everybody realizes it's not really the squad. It's more like, what the bottom line, which everybody knows the business and it's the bottom line and the success on what you do on the field. But, building that is important. And as you keep booting people that are, like, oh, so I'm part of the family, but, I'm going to be disowned if I get injured or if I get a failing grade in school or something like that. That's not really a family, is it? So I think it's kind of like tough to do that balance. But I know what you're saying, Chris, in terms of, about hanging on to some of these players and paying wages, knowing that you probably will not get what you need from that wage and what you need from that player. Ox is like a great example, right? I mean, the potential, but if you realistically can look at the situation, I think you can say, man, I don't see this happening. I love Ox, and I always throw the great opportunity for Ox. It's like a famous inside joke in our podcast, but I just think we do sometimes put too much faith. I don't know. Like I just talked about having that team feeling, building the squad and stuff like that. I don't think anybody in the squad is going to be like, what? Ox leaving? Why? He's always here. Nobody's going to say that. Everybody's going to understand, I feel, and it's not going to hurt that equation of, having a player who's not reliable and you kind of like moving on from them. I mean, we've done this with Danny. We've done this with Lallana, where we have kind of moved on and didn't re-sign him. I feel like, Klopp loved Lallana, and I know he wanted more playing time. That was one of the reasons they both wanted to leave. But at the same time, that's what's also concerning too. We have these players who are willing to stay knowing they're not going to play much, and that's a concern to me because where is the incentive? It's sometimes good to have a player like that, like Divock, where he's content with his situation and he's going to, whenever he comes in, he's going to give you, you're not going to drop off. He's going to give you exactly what you expect from him every single time. But that's very rare. Usually when you have players that are kind of content with the wages and the situation, you're not going to get a lot of drive from them. Chris says Robos said in an interview that he was teaching Naby English when he first got there. That probably set him back years and actually learning. Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's probably the last guy I'd rather learn English from Bobby than probably Robo. And Bobby does not speak a lot of English. So, yeah, that's definitely saying a lot. So, that's probably enough Keita talk for today. It's just a very frustrating situation. I think that's like the main thing that's going on with the club right now. I mean, obviously you have the injuries. Does not sound like we're getting anybody in. Obviously things happen and things can change. Sometimes, talks are happening in the background and stuff. But, like if you look at a lot of the reliable journalists, they acting like nothing is going to happen, like nothing is being in the works right now to even happen. But we know how these deals work. Within the last 2 days, within the last freaking day, a lot of stuff happens. So we have a week to go here. We'll see if anything happens. But I mean, if anything happens with this Keita deal, for a fact, I mean, Klopp has said so that, if Keita is leaving, somebody else is definitely coming in. Who that person is, like I say, with this Dortmund being interested in Keita, that's why I think it's a more interesting headline than other Bundesliga teams being interested, because that part goes without saying. But some of the other headlines, there were the Carabao Cup games yesterday. So I'm kind of torn on this, and those of you guys who are up in this morning listening, I would like to get your take on this. Where as a player, as a team, I should say, not as a player, but look at the headlines. Everton kind of squeezing the win, and it's not like, they had like Demar Gray who scored the goal, and it's not that much of a, take it easy lineup. But Fulham went out in the first round, but especially for those teams, and this is what I want to kind of get your guys' take on. Is it really a bad thing that they're out of the Carabao Cup? I realize like a lot of the smaller teams, let's say, probably not the right terminology, but you guys know what I mean. Do they see it as, I know they value these cups a lot more, but especially smaller or have bigger fish to fry teams in the Premier League, such as a Fulham, Everton, is it really a big deal when they say goodbye to the Carabao Cup? Because then actually they can focus on the Premier League and staying in the Premier League. A team like Fulham, who has had a decent start to the season, obviously, but your first season back and stuff, you're trying to be, the next Brighton, right? Come up to the Premier League and be, a resident, if you will, not just rented, but a permanent resident of the Premier League in terms of like, the financial gains it brings. I know perhaps you're losing some minor financial gains that you would get by staying in the Carabao Cup in terms of like gates and stuff like that. But in the long run, you rather much have your squads and, worry about staying in the Premier League, because that's, first of all, that's a lot more money. And that's really the ultimate goal. Just getting 2 more rounds in the Carabao Cup doesn't mean jack to the fans or the club or the community or the city if you're getting relegated from the Premier League. Let's see. Chris says, I think Fulham cares way more about staying up. And I think they should. I think that's like the biggest thing. Ian says, easy to say that when we're in top 4, but if we have a bad season, League Cup takes a better status. Oh, yeah, definitely. But I think that's, when you're looking at teams that are, like Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, like the top teams that are expected to be on the top. I'm more talking about teams that are probably more expected to be on the bottom and fighting for relegation in terms of staying up. I think to those teams, if I'm a coach or if I'm the owner, I'm more like, man, I'm not even worried about that. That's fine. It would have been nice to keep going. But if it's going to let us not have a midweek game and focus all week on the Premier League game to be able to snatch a point, snatch 3 points, so we can stay in the Premier League, keep that money coming, slowly improve the squad. I think as an owner, I would much rather have that. Okay, Alan has a random one here. Here's a laugh. Ballboy, who was kicked by ex-Chelsea player Hazard, reveals he has been named on Sunday Times rich list, age 26, thanks to 40 million vodka empire. But he is the hero of the really over 65 million pound fortune. What the heck was he doing there? Ian says good way to play lesser players too. And I think so. I mean, for like I say, but that goes again to teams like us. It's good to have some younger guys out there getting that experience, especially if they're playing against, like a championship side or whatever it might be, work playing in that system and getting there. But like I say, if I was an owner of a club that is going to be fighting for relegation, and you kind of know it going into it. I mean, you're not playing, obviously in an ideal scenario, you don't want to even do that. But knowing, how much you invested and how much other teams invested, or perhaps how much other teams can invest come January and you can't because you just came to the Premier League or whatever the case might be. I would much rather make sure we're in the Premier League one more season and say, hey, you know what? Let's improve the squad. Let's get some depth next year. We'll kind of like try to go on the Carabao Cup a bit more too, kind of a deal. But I know what Ian is saying. I would love to hear from. It's going to be really hard in the morning coffee with American Scouser to hear from a Fulham fan, but maybe we'll do like a survey or something to find out, if a team like that even cares about getting eliminated. I don't expect them to be happy, but I don't know if it's like a big bother to them, or maybe it is. I mean, I'm not going to say nobody likes losing a game, but I think it has the importance to teams that aren't getting Europe and aren't getting relegated. Those mid-table teams have nothing else to look forward to. Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways I can see that, like mid-table team who's confident that, they will be a consistent fixture in the Premier League. Let's try to think of an example over here, like a Brighton perhaps comes to mind, or even maybe like a Brentford, who seem to be able to, looks like might be able to continue their like improvements. Trying to think of other things. I would have said normally Leicester City. Not that we're bashing on Brandon Rodgers here this morning, but yeah, God knows if they're going to be in that conversation. But normally it will be teams like that, right? Like, well, we would have said West Ham and stuff like that. But I think for like a teams that are in danger of getting relegated, it's kind of like should not be, in my mind at least, as big of a deal, because it gives you. I mean, you look at Everton, for example. I'm sure that their fans are happy because it would be more avoiding the embarrassment than advancing, I think, to, losing to like Fleetwood Town, right? But if something happens, like with all these injuries they have and the struggles they have, I think it would be more of a pain in the ass later on if you miss people. Dear old Brandon, not you're bashing him, says Alan. No, yes. The humor of this whole thing, by the way, is right now our friend Mecca, who has gin in the morning, is or at least says the moonshine, the tea guy is actually setting up cameras in a church as we speak, getting ready for the broadcast. I think that is the biggest irony of every single morning right now, but hoping to have Mecca soon. I don't know how you guys feel about these solo shows, but I would definitely rather have somebody that constantly bashes Brandon Rodgers or somebody else, or hey, they could even bash me for all I care. But glad you guys are with me this morning. Definitely makes the conversation flow a lot easier going back and forth with you guys, getting some discussion going as opposed to me just being a talking head and a big head at that. Going back to the conversation earlier, Chris was talking about Klopp and FSG are treating player performances like drug addicts. Look at Ox. He balled out when he got hurt, then got hurt. They were wanting those performances again so bad, they gave him a new contract while injured. We see the best of players, then just keep hoping they'll get back to that level, and it never happens. And I think that is a very honest look at it, and I don't think FSG can look at it like that. With Ox, I thought it was a different deal. When we re-signed them, I should say, because that was more about a dude who was really balling at the time, right? And we almost felt like maybe he's done with these injury woes. And, like, look at the guy we can get. And Then we look at, he gets injured. I think if, going back to what I was talking about earlier, I think if you pull the trigger then and say, you know what, man, you're injured now, and, treat him like a horse and take him out to the back and shoot him because he's hurt. I think then that is a bad message to the rest of the team and that whole family squad concept, right? But an off season like this one, where you've kind of seen it since then in terms of what you can get from Ox, not moving on from him, I think that's a mistake. Because I think if we did something this summer and taken the loss and moved him to another team, maybe take part of the wages or give a better deal because we know the other team is going to take on his wages, whatever the case might be, I think it would have been fair. And I think everybody else would have understood in the squad, and it would not be as much as like, what, Ox, where's he going? So I think that's where the difference should be when we talk about the happy medium of moving on from players and getting something for them and letting them run their contract. It should not be one or the other. At times, we should be able to say, you know what? In the long run, this doesn't look like it's going to work. Cut our losses short. Get something for him, even if it is not much. And I think that's another issue that we sometimes have, Chris, with FSG or maybe perhaps Klopp. We don't know who, but we overvalue some of our guys and perhaps set the price a bit too high. Our evaluation is a lot higher on them, maybe not realizing or admitting that they are not reliable and they're not worth that investment to another team. I mean, like, think about if you are I think Gally was trying to really push Ox to Crystal Palace, if I remember right. But like a team like that, like Crystal Palace, Fulham, whoever it might be, like people who can maybe use Ox in the, what he brings. I think it's, do you really want, if you're a Crystal Palace fan, do you want your club forking out that much money to a guy, who could be really good, but he's never been reliable for him? Why are we spending all this money? I mean, if we sign somebody like that, I remember when we got Thiago. And, everybody was like, and I guess maybe some of them were right because he was not reliable, but I still feel like we've gotten our value for him in terms of like the quality he brings. But even then, there were a lot of concerns and it wasn't like a big money signing or anything like that. So if you're asking 15, 20 for Ox and you want Crystal Palace or Fulham to make it one of their most expensive signings for the offseason, I don't know if you're going to get that just because of the reliability. Because if I'm Fulham or Crystal Palace, I'm not spending my biggest signing on a guy that might not be, or more than likely will not be, let's say, reliable. So that's kind of like the dilemma we have. And I think that's kind of like built up to the midfield woes that we are having right now. I realize when you look at that list of people that are injured, it is pretty abysmal. And, it's going to be interesting to see what we do and how we offset this. If we don't do any moves now, how we offset this come January or next summer, because you would have to do a lot of moves. There would have to be a lot of turnover to do that. Ian says, do you think transfer window to be closed once season starts? I think in most cases, definitely yes. And I think Klopp would agree to this. And I think it was in the Premier League show, which is about to air today later on, by the way, on American Scouser TV. As we were talking about teams with Gally, I kind of thought there were at least 3 or 4 clubs that will benefit from the window closing. Because, yes, these guys are pros, but they're human. And if your name is constantly here and there, I mean, can you imagine like you wake up every morning and a guy like me is on YouTube talking about you rumored to be going here, to be going there. Like every morning you wake up and you don't know where you're going to be in like 2 weeks, and you kind of like constantly got this stuff going. So I think a lot of clubs are suffering right now from some of their players not being able to give their best and what you normally get from them because the minds are not clear. I mean, like I say, these guys are human. Everybody's like, they get a lot of money, they should go out there and play. I don't give a damn. They're still human. I mean, if you can't do it, they're still human. They can't do it either. If you're constantly worrying about something else in your mind, if you have a family member going, like having surgery that morning or something like that, and if you're at work, you're not your best because half your mind is there, right? So if you're like, you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow, or if your job is in jeopardy, you're not usually at your best because, if your company is about to be bought out or whatever, I mean, like, you got to be able to have some empathy and put it in your like situation that you or some others might have been in. And it's normal to expect these guys not to give their best or not be able to focus to be able to give their best. It's not like they're doing it on purpose, but it's a lot of like focus required to give your best. And the margins are not as big as we think they are. I mean, these players, yeah, one of them is better than the other one. But if one of them is better than the other one, but cannot have that full focus, that levels up pretty darn fast. So I think that's why it's important to kind of get this window out of the way, Ian, so that, you know, people can actually play their game and not worry about all this crap. And Chris says, I think the transfer window should close a week or two before the season. And I agree. And Ian does as well. I think so. I think so. But I know this season that was almost impossible thanks to the World Cup in Qatar. I mean, it's like the gift that freaking gives on giving, that whole World Cup fiasco. But some people are on a beach somewhere this morning thanks to it, probably. So that's why we're having it in winter, guys. Well, it's time for that second cup of Joe already. Thanks, guys, for joining me, helping conversation flow along. Hopefully, we do have the Champions League draw tomorrow, as Chris says. So that should be interesting, and that will probably bring a lot of talking points as well. Coming up for the week, let me know if you guys have certain specific topics to address as well, and we can chat about those, especially on days like this where I really half the headlines were just about the whole United's is the best team in the world and Liverpool is the worst team in the world pundit takes that I did not really want to be a part of. And I told you guys yesterday, kind of trying to put that behind us. Bournemouth is next. And next for me is a cup of coffee and hopefully a great day for you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody.